there, crime enthusiasts. You've tuned in to the Guilty Files True Crime Rewritten, where we believe every crime deserves a second act. True Crime Rewritten is our tagline, and tonight I'm here to deliver exactly that. The Guilty Files True Crime Rewritten is the podcast where we take the darkest corners of true crime and twist them into an even more tangled web of intrigue. I'm Dani, your host and your guide for this evening's journey into the unknown. I've seen the human condition in all its gritty, complicated glory, whether it's chasing suspects through crowded neighborhoods or navigating the minds of people on the edge of morality. Earlier this week, you heard the facts from Brian, laid out with precision and expertise. But now, it's time to blur the lines between reality and imagination. With my background in sociology, psychology, and a gritty 5 years as an Atlanta beat cop, I've got the expertise and just enough sass to take this case into uncharted territory. Together, we'll uncover new motives, reimagine the characters, and spin a tale that's as entertaining as it is intriguing. I'll be your navigator as we dive headfirst into the embellished and fictionalized world inspired by that same case file. We're about to unravel the what-ifs, dive into hidden motives, and explore alternate possibilities you didn't see coming. Get ready for a story with heart-pounding suspense, unexpected turns, and a bit of guilty pleasure, because the Guilty Files True Crime Rewritten is just getting started. Today, we're diving back into the world of John Wayne Gacy, the man who turned the concept of a killer clown into a living nightmare. My co-host already gave you the straight facts about Gacy in the original episode earlier this week. But here on True Crime Rewritten, facts aren't the end of the story. They're the beginning. We'll layer on the what-ifs, the untold stories, and the sociological and psychological twists that transform his heinous acts into an even more compelling narrative. Buckle up, true crime fanatics. This is Gacy Reimagined. We all know the saying, no man is an island. And in the case of John Wayne Gacy, this adage raises a tantalizing question. Could he really have committed 33 murders all on his own? Today, we're diving into the accomplice theory, where we'll explore the possibility that Gacy had help. Were there others who dug trenches, silenced victims? Let's take a closer look at the people who were closest to him and imagine how their roles might have gone far beyond what's on record. Welcome to Act 1, the accomplice theory. Let's start with the age-old question. Could John Wayne Gacy have done it all alone? 33 murders, countless manipulations, and a near-perfect facade of normalcy. If that doesn't scream, I had help, I don't know what does. Now, officially, Gacy acted alone, or so the courts decided. But in our reimagined tale, let's consider a darker possibility. What if Gacy's success wasn't just due to his cunning, but a network of accomplices? Let me introduce you to Michael Rossi and David Cram, two of Gacy's employees who lived in his house and helped dig those infamous crawlspace trenches. Imagine Rossi, a bright-eyed young man with an innocent demeanor being manipulated into complicity. And this dramatized lens, Rossi, initially digs those trenches, thinking they're for drainage. But slowly, Gacy begins to groom him, not just as an employee, but as a partner in crime. Maybe Gacy frames it as a game, a way to prove his loyalty. Over time, Rossi realizes the truth, but stays silent, trapped by fear and guilt. And Cram? Picture him as the reluctant enforcer. In our fictionalized version, Gacy preys on his vulnerabilities, offering him alcohol, money, and twisted fatherly approval. Cram knows what's happening in that house, but convinces himself he can't escape. And when one victim fights back, Cram is forced to help, sealing his fate as a co-conspirator. Michael Rossi hadn't planned on staying in Norwood Park for long. At 20, he was restless, driven by a big city dream, but tethered by small-town obligations. He'd left his family in Michigan with promises to send money back and a heart full of ambition that outpaced his experience. When John Wayne Gacy offered him a job at PDM Contractors, Michael saw it as a stepping stone, his ticket to a brighter future. Gacy was magnetic in a way Michael hadn't encountered before. "You're a sharp kid," Gacy said on their first meeting, clapping Michael on the back with a grin. "Stick with me and you'll go places." For a man whose words felt like gospel to those around him, Gacy had a knack for making you feel chosen. David Cram, a high school dropout with calloused hands and a rebellious streak, had a different story. For him, Gacy wasn't a mentor, but a savior. After a messy breakup with his family, David found himself sleeping in his car, scraping by on odd jobs. Gacy offered him more than work. He offered him stability, a room in his house, warm meals, and the assurance of a second chance. The two young men didn't trust each other at first. Michael, the clean-cut charmer, saw David as too rough around the edges. And David thought Michael was soft, all talk and no grit. But under Gacy's roof, they became reluctant allies, bound by the unspoken rules of their benefactor's kingdom. The first time Gacy asked Michael to dig a trench in the crawlspace, it was framed as a favor. "I need someone I can trust," Gacy had said, handing him a shovel. "You're detail-oriented, and this has to be perfect." Michael worked for hours, the earth damp and heavy beneath his feet. The crawlspace smelled of mildew and something metallic, though he couldn't place the source. Gacy hovered nearby, directing him with an unsettling precision. When David joined the project a week later, he didn't ask questions. Gacy's instructions were simple. "Dig it exactly like I've marked." David thought it was strange that the trenches were so deep and narrow, but he wasn't in a position to argue. Gacy had been good to him, and if the man wanted to install new drainage pipes, who was he to question it? Over time, the crawlspace became a shared secret, a grim reminder of their place in Gacy's world. David joked about it once, calling it Gacy's crypt. But the laugh that followed felt hollow, even to him. The first time Michael saw Gacy's temper, it was like watching a storm roll in. One of the workers at PDM, a teenager named Kenny, had shown up late. Gacy waited until the others had left before cornering him in the garage. Michael and David overheard the shouting, the sound of something heavy hitting the concrete and the silence that followed. Later, Gacy appeared in the living room, wiping his hands on a towel. "Kenny won't be a problem anymore," he said with a tight smile. The next day, Michael noticed Kenny's wallet on the kitchen counter. That night, Gacy called Michael into his office. "You're smart," Gacy said, his tone almost fatherly. "You know how to keep your mouth shut. That's why I like you." He handed Michael an envelope of cash. "Keep up the good work." Michael didn't sleep that night. He told himself it wasn't his business, that Kenny had probably just quit. But when Gacy asked him to spread lime in the crawlspace the next day, his hands shook. David's moment came weeks later. Gacy had been drinking, his face flushed, and his words slurred. "You ever wonder why?" "People think I'm such a nice guy," he asked, leaning back in his chair. David shrugged, unsure how to respond. "Because I know how to take care of problems," Gacy continued, his smile sharp and predatory. "But I can't do it alone. I need people I can rely on." It wasn't a request. It was a test. When Gacy handed David a pair of handcuffs, he hesitated. "What's this for?" Gacy's grin widened. Just a demonstration. David felt his pulse quicken as Gacy fastened the cuffs around his own wrists, then slipped them off effortlessly with a hidden key. "Your turn," Gacy said, handing them over. David locked the cuffs around his wrists and immediately regretted it. Gacy laughed as he tightened them further, leaving David struggling against the metal. "Lesson 1, Gacy said, leaning in close. "Never let your guard down." For months, Michael and David danced on the edge of complicity. They followed orders, dug trenches, and kept their questions to themselves, but the cracks in their resolve began to show. Michael started drinking more, his easy charm giving way to paranoia. He avoided the crawl space, claiming he had other jobs to finish. David, on the other hand, grew angrier. He snapped at Gacy over small things, his frustration boiling over in unexpected ways. One night, after too many beers, Michael confronted David. "You know what's going on here, don't you?" he asked, his voice shaking. David didn't respond. His jaw clenched. "We're just as bad as he is," Michael continued, his words slurred. "We're digging graves, Dave. Don't you get that?" David's fist tightened, but he didn't argue. They both knew the truth, but acknowledging it felt like crossing a line they couldn't return from. The breaking point came when Gacy introduced a new victim, a quiet teenager named Sam. Michael and David both saw the fear in the boy's eyes, the way he flinched at Gacy's touch. For Michael, it was too much. He tried to leave, packing a bag and heading for the door, but Gacy blocked his path. "You don't walk away from me," Gacy said, his voice low, menacing. "Not after everything I've done for you." David watched from the stairs, his heart pounding. He knew he should intervene, but fear kept him rooted in place. The next day, Sam was gone. And Gacy acted as if nothing had happened, but for Michael and David, the weight of their silence was crushing. They weren't just bystanders anymore, they were complicit. Years later, after Gacy's arrest, Michael and David were both questioned by police. Their stories were full of gaps, their answers hesitant. They denied knowing anything about the murders. But the crawl space told a different story. And this reimagined narrative, Michael and David, are more than just employees. They're reluctant participants, manipulated into a web of fear and loyalty. Their complicity raises uncomfortable questions about morality, survival, and the power of change. Would they have made different choices if they'd known the full extent of Gacy's crimes? Or were they victims in their own right, trapped in the orbit of a man who thrived on control? The answers remain as murky as the crawl space itself. When it comes to serial killers, we often focus on the victims who didn't survive. But what about the ones who might have? In this act, a hidden victim emerges. We'll reimagine a world where one of Gacy's prey escapes but doesn't even realize it. What happens when the mind locks trauma away so deeply that it takes decades to uncover the truth? And what could such a revelation mean for the case today? Let's explore this haunting possibility. Welcome to Act 2, A Hidden Victim Emerges. Now let's reimagine another angle. What if one of Gacy's victims didn't die? Picture this. Years later, a man named Adam Jameson appears. He's in his 40s, struggling with fragmented memories and night terrors. He doesn't know why he's afraid of small, dark spaces, or why the smell of quicklime makes him physically ill. Enter a modern-day cold case investigator with access to advanced neuroimaging technology. Through trauma-focused therapy, Adam begins to recover suppressed memories. He recalls being lured into Gacy's home as a teen and waking up in that crawl space. In this dramatized scenario, Adam escaped by sheer luck, only to be left for dead emotionally. His rediscovered story reopens the case, raising questions about how many victims truly survived and whether more accomplices might be out there. Let's take a moment to explore the remarkable tools that could make such a discovery possible. Neuroimaging technology. It sounds fancy, right? But stick with me. It's simpler than you might think. Imagine your brain as a city at night. Neuroimaging is like taking an aerial photo of that city, capturing the lights to show where activity is happening. The bright spots are areas buzzing with energy, while darker areas are quiet. Techniques like fMRI, known as functional magnetic resonance imaging, or PET scans, known as positron emission tomography, allow us to see those lights in real time, giving us a glimpse of what's going on inside the mind. An fMRI is like a highly sensitive heat map. It measures blood flow in the brain to determine which regions are active during certain tasks or emotions. For example, when you think about a traumatic event, your amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear, lights up like fireworks. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, which helps with logic and decision-making, might go dim. This imbalance is key to understanding trauma. A PET scan, on the other hand, uses a small amount of radioactive tracer to show how the brain metabolizes energy. Think of it like tracking traffic patterns in a city. Where are the cars, aka energy, going, and where are the bottlenecks? This is crucial for identifying areas of the brain that might be damaged or altered by trauma. Now let's talk about how this incredible technology fits into trauma-focused therapy. When someone experiences severe trauma, their brain can become like a malfunctioning security system. It's on high alert, reacting to perceived threats that aren't really there. This is why survivors might feel anxiety or fear in situations that seem safe to others. Here's where neuroimaging comes in. By mapping the brain, therapists can see exactly which areas are overactive or underactive. This isn't just a cool party trick, it's actionable information. So for instance, if the amygdala is constantly firing, the therapist knows the person's fear response is stuck in overdrive. Or if the hippocampus, which processes memories, shows unusual activity, it might explain why the person is struggling with flashbacks or fragmented memories. Using this data, therapists can tailor their approach. One method is EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Here, patients recall traumatic events while following a therapist's finger or a moving light. This process helps rewire the brain, reducing the intensity of traumatic memories. Neuroimaging provides a before and after snapshot, showing how therapy physically changes the brain. Now, let's apply this to a cold case, like our hidden victim, Adam Jamison. Adam is in his 40s, struggling with unexplained night terrors, claustrophobia, and a visceral reaction to certain smells like quicklime, though he doesn't know why. These symptoms are like breadcrumbs, leading back to something buried deep in his subconscious. Enter Dr. Karen Ruiz, a trauma-focused therapist working with cutting-edge neuroimaging. She begins with an fMRI scan, while Adam describes his dreams. As he recounts a recurring nightmare of being trapped in a dark, suffocating space, the fMRI lights up in the amygdala and insula, areas tied to fear and pain perception. Dr. Ruiz notes these spikes and begins guiding Adam through EMDR sessions. During one session, Adam's fragmented memories start to align. He recalls a man in clown makeup offering him a drink, the smell of damp earth, and the sensation of struggling against something tight around his wrists. Each detail is a puzzle piece, and Dr. Ruiz documents them carefully. While Adam is in therapy, a cold case investigator, Detective Lena Carter, reviews his emerging memories. Using neuroimaging reports from Dr. Ruiz, Detective Carter cross-references Adam's descriptions with old police files. The mention of quicklime in a crawlspace narrows the suspect pool. Detective Carter focuses on a set of victims who fit Adam's profile. Young, vulnerable boys who disappeared in the same area. Neuroimaging also plays a role in building Adam's credibility. Trauma survivors often struggle to be believed, especially in cases decades old. But Detective Carter uses the scans to show that Adam's brain activity aligns with known trauma patterns. In court, these scans could serve as powerful evidence, bridging the gap between Adam's recovered memories and hard facts. This fictional scenario isn't far from reality. Neuroimaging is already helping researchers understand trauma, and its potential applications in law enforcement are groundbreaking. From identifying hidden victims to validating witness accounts, this technology could be a game changer in solving cold cases. And here's the big takeaway. Trauma doesn't just leave emotional scars, it leaves physical ones too. By understanding the mind, we can bring justice to those who thought they'd been forgotten. The courtroom, a stage where truth battles lies, and every single detail matters. Gacy's trial was already a spectacle, but what if we turned up the drama just a notch in this courtroom drama reimagined? We'll dive into the strategy behind Gacy's defense, the psychological chess match over his sanity, and the ripple effects of a juror swayed by doubt. Buckle up. This is legal theater at its most twisted. Welcome to Act 3. The courtroom, the ultimate stage for theatrics. In our fictionalized retelling, Gacy's trial isn't just a battle of legal minds, it's a full-blown psychological chess match. Let's lean into the defense's strategy of portraying Gacy as a man with multiple personalities. Picture this. Bad Jack, Gacy's supposed homicidal alter ego, takes center stage during testimony. His lawyers argue that Gacy himself was a puppet, merely the host body for this murderous persona. The prosecution counters with cutting-edge psychiatric experts who expose the manipulation, unraveling Gacy's calculated lies. But here's the twist. What if one of the jurors started to believe the insanity defense? Could it create a hung jury, forcing the case into even murkier waters? Bad Jack was everything Gacy claimed he wasn't. Cruel, impulsive, and devoid of morality. The defense argued that Bad Jack was the one who committed the murders, while Gacy, the hardworking businessman, the jovial clown, the community leader, had no knowledge of these atrocities. In this reimagined version of events, the defense leans heavily into this narrative. They bring in expert witnesses to describe the phenomenon of dissociative identity disorder, or DID, playing on the jury's lack of understanding about the condition. They introduce psychiatric reports that show Gacy speaking in different tones, claiming, I didn't do it. Jack did. Now picture this. The jury is sequestered and the deliberations begin. It's supposed to be straightforward. 33 murders don't leave much wiggle room. But then a juror speaks up. What if he's telling the truth? What if Gacy really didn't know what he was doing? This hypothetical juror, let's call her Linda, she isn't naive. She's a middle school teacher, logical and empathetic. But the thought of someone's mind splitting into pieces, that strikes a chord. She's read about trauma, about how people's brains sometimes fracture to protect them from unimaginable pain. Another juror, a retired police officer named Tom, laughs, isn't buying it. Come on, Linda, he says, leaning forward. This guy ran a construction business, organized parades, and buried 26 bodies under his house. That doesn't sound like someone who wasn't in control. The room erupts into debate. Linda points to the testimony of a psychologist who claimed Gacy exhibited signs of DID. Tom counters with the prosecution's argument that Gacy's actions luring victims, covering his tracks, and maintaining his public image were all methodical and deliberate. You don't handcuff someone and call it a magic trick if you're not in control, Tom argues. But Linda isn't alone. Another juror, Karen, chimes in. What if he's both? What if he's guilty but also insane? Isn't that possible? Suddenly, the lines blur. What started as a straightforward verdict becomes a moral and psychological quandary. To some jurors, it's compelling, while to others, it's blatant manipulation. Days turn into weeks, and the jury remains deadlocked. On one side, there are those like Linda and Karen who see Gacy as a tragic figure, a man whose mind fractured under the weight of trauma and abuse. And on the other, people like Tom, who see a manipulative killer using an insanity plea as his last-ditch effort to escape justice. The pressure mounts. The media is circling like vultures, hungry for a verdict. The judge reminds the jury of their duty, urging them to come to a consensus, but the damage is done. "We can't just let him go," Tom says in frustration. "And we can't convict a man who might not have been in control of his actions," Linda counters. Eventually, the foreman stands and delivers the news. "Your Honor, we're hopelessly deadlocked. It's a hung jury. In this fictional scenario, the fallout is explosive." The prosecution immediately moves to retry the case, but Gacy's defense team is emboldened. They refine their strategy, leaning harder into the narrative of Bad Jack. Public opinion splits. Some people view Gacy as a cunning manipulator who's exploiting a legal loophole, while others see him as a victim of his own broken mind, a man who needs treatment, not punishment. The victims' families are upset, outraged. For them, justice delayed feels like justice denied. Protesters gather outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Bad Jack equals bad excuse." Others read justice for victims. Meanwhile, Gacy himself thrives on the attention. In interviews, he leans into the persona of Bad Jack, speaking in a gravelly voice and referring to himself in the third person. "Jack did things I'd never do," he tells one journalist. "I tried to stop him, but he was too strong." It's a chilling performance, one that leaves even seasoned professionals questioning where the act ends and the truth begins. Let's pause for a moment and unpack this. What would a hung jury mean, not just for the trial, but for the broader understanding of justice? From a psychological perspective, the defense's argument hinges on the concept of disassociation, a phenomenon where the mind splits to protect itself from overwhelming trauma. For some jurors, this explanation resonates, especially in light of Gacy's abusive childhood. But is it enough to excuse 33 murders? This scenario also highlights the power of persuasion in the courtroom. The defense didn't just put Gacy on trial, they put the jury's understanding of mental illness on trial. And in doing so, they created a crack wide enough for doubt to slip through. This fictional hung jury raises larger questions about the intersection of mental health and justice. Can someone be both guilty and mentally ill? How do we balance compassion for a damaged mind with accountability for unspeakable crimes? And perhaps most chillingly, how much power does doubt hold in a system that relies on certainty? In our reimagined version of events, John Wayne Gacy doesn't walk free, but he also doesn't face the swift justice his victims deserved. Instead, his case becomes a symbol of the complexities of the human mind and the imperfections of the justice system. And while Bad Jack might only exist in Gacy's twisted imagination, he leaves a haunting legacy, a reminder that the most dangerous monsters aren't always the ones we can see. Few things are as chilling as the image of John Wayne Gacy in clown makeup. But was Pogo the Clown just a costume, or was it something far darker? In this act, we'll dive into the eerie possibility that Gacy's alter ego wasn't just a disguise, but it was a manifestation of his most violent impulses. What happens when the mask becomes the man? Let's peel back the grease paint. Welcome to Act 4, the killer clown persona. Let's talk about Pogo the Clown. Arguably, one of the creepiest aspects of Gacy's double life. In our fictionalized version, we dive deeper into the psyche of Pogo. What if Gacy's clown persona wasn't just a costume, but instead a full-fledged mask for his darkest urges? Picture this. Pogo becomes a split personality, whispering to Gacy at night, and when Gacy puts on the grease paint, he doesn't just become Pogo, he loses himself entirely. Imagine scenes where Pogo taunts Gacy in his reflection or takes over during moments of violence. This descent into madness would add an eerie psychological layer to his already terrifying legacy. Let's talk about coulrophobia, the fear of clowns. If the thought of John Wayne Gacy dressed as Pogo the Clown sends a shiver down your spine, you're not alone. Studies suggest that clown phobia is more common than you might actually think, especially in children. A 2008 study published in Nursing Standard found that out of 250 children surveyed in a hospital, every single one said they disliked clowns. Yeah, you heard that right. Every single one. But why? After all, clowns were designed to entertain, to bring joy with slapstick humor and painted smiles. Yet somewhere along the line, they took a sharp turn from silly to sinister. So how do these jesters of joy become potent omens of horror? Clowns are a prime example of how something intended to be fun can become deeply unsettling. Their unnaturally painted faces obscure their true expressions, creating a psychological dissonance. You don't actually know if the person beneath that smile is truly happy or hiding something sinister. Psychologists have linked this discomfort to something called the uncanny valley, the uneasy feeling we get when something looks almost human but is not quite right. A clown's exaggerated features, paired with their unpredictable behavior, hit all the uncanny notes, especially for those who crave stability and predictability. Pop culture has taken this inherent discomfort and run with it. Think of Pennywise from It, the Joker from Batman, or even real-world figures like Gacy. Clowns are the perfect horror trope because they mix something seemingly innocent with pure malevolence. The juxtaposition amplifies the fear. It's not just a monster, it's a monster hiding behind a mask of cheer. Here's another layer. Clowns don't just entertain, they exaggerate. They mimic and amplify human behavior, often crossing the line into chaos. In that way, clowns represent the IID, the primal, untamed part of our psyche that craves indulgence and rebellion. In horror, clowns often symbolize society's darker impulses. There are RI and archic, rejecting rules and norms. This makes them a powerful narrative tool for exploring themes of fear, loss of control, and even hidden evil. When we fear clowns, we're really fearing the chaos they represent, the loss of predictability, the betrayal of trust, and the unsettling truth that the happiest masks can hide the darkest faces. And then, of course, there's Gacy. His role as Pogo the Clown solidified the association between clowns and killers in the public imagination. The idea that a man could don a costume, entertain children, and then commit unspeakable acts cemented clowns as a symbol of duplicity and horror. Gacy weaponized his clown persona, turning a figure of joy and fun into one of fear. And in doing so, he created a chilling archetype: the killer clown, one that continues to haunt our cultural consciousness to this day. Whether it's Gacy's Pogo, Pennywise lurking in the sewers, or the eerie, exaggerated grins of modern-day clowns, the figure of the clown has become an enduring symbol of fear. And maybe that's because deep down, we know that not every smile is genuine, and not every laugh is innocent. They say childhood shapes the person you become. So what if John Wayne Gacy's childhood had been different? In this act, an alternate childhood will take a step back and imagine a world where young Gacy got the support and intervention he so desperately needed. Could a better environment have saved him, or was he destined to become a monster no matter what? Let's explore the crossroads of nature, nurture, and fate. Welcome to Act 5. What if John Wayne Gacy's story had a different beginning. Let's reimagine his childhood. What if, instead of enduring abuse and neglect, young Gacy had access to counseling and a supportive community? In our alternate reality, this intervention redirects his life's direction and thus changes his trajectory. He channels his energy into becoming a true civic leader, using his charisma to create programs for at-risk youth. But here's the tragic twist. Even with this alternate upbringing, Gacy still succumbs to his darker tendencies. This scenario explores the age-old question in sociology and psychology of, is it nature, nurture, or the other way around, or something more sinister? When it comes to people like John Wayne Gacy, the question always arises, was he born a monster, or did his environment create him? This is the nature versus nurture debate, one of the most enduring discussions in psychology and sociology today. On one side, the nature argument suggests that Gacy's behavior stemmed from his biological makeup, genetics, brain chemistry, or neurological abnormalities. This perspective posits that some individuals are predisposed to antisocial behavior due to factors like impaired frontal lobe development, which is responsible for impulse control, empathy, and moral reasoning. On the other side, the nurture argument focuses on Gacy's environment, his abusive father, his chaotic childhood, and the toxic masculinity that shaped his worldview. Advocates of this perspective argue that these experiences taught Gacy that violence and domination were acceptable ways to express anger and gain control. Of course, most psychologists today agree that it's rarely one or the other. Instead, it's the interaction of nature and nurture, how genetics and environment collide, that shapes behavior. But could intervention during Gacy's childhood have changed his path? And if he were alive today, what tools and techniques could therapists use to help someone with his background? If a young John Wayne Gacy walked into a therapist's office today, the approach would be far different than anything available in his era. Modern therapy combines evidence-based techniques with trauma-informed care, creating a holistic framework to address the root cause of problematic behavior. Let's explore 4 examples of tools or resources that might have been used to intervene in Gacy's life. First up is something called early screening for behavioral disorders. Today, early warning signs of antisocial behavior, like aggression, lying, or a lack of empathy, can be identified through behavioral screenings in schools and pediatric clinics. Tools like the Child Behavioral Checklist, also known as CBCL, helps professionals flag issues before they escalate. Imagine a young Gacy flagged by his teachers for frequent outbursts or difficulty forming relationships. This could lead to an early referral to a therapist who might explore the underlying causes of his behavior. Our second example is called trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. Given Gacy's history of abuse, trauma-focused CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, would likely have been a key intervention. This evidence-based approach helps children process and reframe traumatic experiences in a safe, supportive environment. For example, Gacy's therapist might use trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy to address his father's abuse, helping Gacy understand that his father's actions were not his fault. Through role-play and guided discussions, Gacy could learn healthier ways to express anger and frustration, breaking the cycle of violence before it even begins. Our third example is called social-emotional learning programs. Schools today often implement social-emotional learning programs to teach kids critical skills like empathy, emotion regulation, and conflict resolution. These programs are particularly effective for children from difficult home environments. Imagine Gacy participating in group exercises that encourage cooperation, self-awareness, and positive thinking. Over time, These lessons could help him build the social skills and emotional intelligence needed to form positive relationships. Our fourth and last example that we're going to explore briefly is called parent-child interaction therapy. In cases where abuse or neglect is present, parent-child interaction therapy works to heal the parent-child relationship. A therapist coaches parents in real time, teaching them to reinforce positive behavior while managing negative behavior without resorting to violence. If Gacy's father had been open to intervention, parent-child interactive therapy could have taught him alternate discipline strategies, creating a more supportive home environment. It's a long shot, given his father's entrenched habits, but even small changes could have made a difference. Let's imagine an alternate timeline where young Gacy receives these interventions. At 10 years old, his teacher notices that he's withdrawn and prone to outbursts. She refers him to his school counselor, who flags signs of emotional distress. The counselor works with his family, recommending trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy for Gacy and parent-child interaction therapy for his parents. By the time he's a teenager, Gacy is enrolled in a social-emotional learning program where he learns how to manage his emotions and form healthier relationships. His therapist uses empathy training to help him see the impact of his actions on others, planting the seeds of accountability and compassion. Through multisystemic therapy, Gacy is surrounded by a network of positive influences, from supportive teachers to a mentor at his after-school job. Slowly but surely, he begins to see himself not as a victim of his father's abuse, but as someone capable of breaking the cycle. Of course, there's no guarantee that these interventions would have worked. Nature and nurture are deeply intertwined, and some people remain resistant to change, no matter how much help they receive. But the tools we have today give us a fighting chance, one that Gacy and others like him didn't have. If nothing else, his story serves as a reminder of the importance of early intervention, empathy, and understanding. Because while we can't change the past, we can use its lessons to create a better future. If Gacy's case unfolded today, imagine what investigators could uncover with modern technology. In this act, Modern Profiling, we'll explore how advances in DNA, geographic profiling, and forensic psychology could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the killer clown. Could modern science reveal new victims or expose accomplices we never suspected? Let's dive into the possibilities. Welcome to Act 6, Modern Profiling. If Gacy's case were reopened today, imagine the tools at an investigator's disposal. Geographic profiling, advanced DNA analysis, and psychological mapping would paint a more detailed picture of Gacy's patterns. In our fictionalized update, profilers discover that Gacy targeted specific neighborhoods to avoid detection and left subtle markers at his crime scenes, a sinister calling card. And what if a modern profiler uncovered evidence of more victims? Imagine the chilling realization that Gacy didn't stop at 33, but had a network of burial sites across state lines where he buried even more victims. The FBI forms a task force to retrace his steps, uncovering long-lost secrets and reigniting public fascination with the case. If John Wayne Gacy's crimes had come to light today, investigators would have access to cutting-edge technology that could uncover evidence faster, more accurately, and more comprehensively than ever before. In this segment, we'll explore two game-changing advancements the FBI might use to dig deeper into Gacy's case and potentially uncover more victims. Let's start with forensic genealogy, one of the most revolutionary tools in modern criminal investigations. You've probably heard of it in connection with cases like the Golden State Killer, but how does it work, and how could it apply to Gacy's victims? Forensic genealogy combines DNA analysis with vast online family tree databases to identify unknown individuals. Here's how it would work in the context of Gacy's case. Step 1. DNA samples are collected from unidentified victims. This could include bone fragments, hair, or even teeth recovered from Gacy's property. Even decades later, advancements in DNA extraction allow scientists to work with degraded samples. Step 2. The DNA profile is uploaded to public genealogy databases like GEDmatch or Family Tree DNA, where it's compared against millions of profiles. These databases allow for distant relatives, sometimes as far as third or fourth cousins, to be identified. Step 3. Genealogists use this information to build a family tree, tracing the victim's ancestry back to a specific family line. From there, investigators narrow down the possibilities to identify the individual. Forensic genealogy could bring closure to families who have spent decades wondering what happened to their loved ones. But it could also lead to chilling discoveries, like confirming additional victims who were never accounted for. Imagine investigators discovering that one of the unidentified bodies didn't match Gacy's timeline, raising the possibility of an accomplice, or even an earlier spree. Here's a compelling example. In a fictional twist, let's say a young woman named Emily receives a call from the FBI. Her third cousin's DNA matches a sample taken from Gacy's crawlspace. Emily learns that her cousin, a boy who disappeared in the 1970s, was one of Gacy's victims. This discovery sends shockwaves through her family and reignites the search for answers. Was her cousin an isolated case, or are there even more victims waiting to be identified? The second modern advancement we're going to explore today is called geographic profiling, powered by artificial intelligence. While investigators in the 1970s relied on manual methods to track patterns, today's technology can analyze data on a scale and a precision that was unimaginable back then. Here's how it would work in Gacy's case. Step 1. Investigators input data about the locations where Gacy's known victims were last seen, maybe where their bodies were found, and the areas where Gacy was known to frequent. Step 2. AI-powered software, like IBM's Watson, or programs developed specifically for law enforcement, analyzes this data. It looks for patterns such as preferred hunting grounds, time of day, or proximity to specific locations like bus terminals or bars. In Step 3, the software generates a heat map highlighting areas of high probability, places where Gacy may have lured additional victims or disposed of bodies that have yet to be discovered. This technology could be especially valuable in identifying potential dump sites outside Gacy's property. While 26 victims were found in his crawlspace, others were dumped in the Des Plaines River. Could there be more? Geographic profiling might lead investigators to new locations, prompting fresh searches that could yield critical evidence. Here's a compelling example. Imagine the AI heat map points to an abandoned lot near a Greyhound station, an area Gacy frequented in the 1970s. Investigators use ground-penetrating radar to scan the site and discover skeletal remains buried under layers of soil. The discovery of a new victim not only adds to the body count, but raises questions about whether Gacy was more prolific than previously thought. Together, forensic genealogy and AI-driven geographic profiling represent a powerful one-two punch for uncovering the truth. Forensic genealogy gives names to the nameless, honoring the humanity of victims long forgotten. Geographic profiling shines a light on patterns that might otherwise go unnoticed, expanding the scope of the investigation. If these technologies had been available during Gacy's time, we might have uncovered the full extent of his crimes, or perhaps even prevented some of them. Modern technology has given us tools that bridge the gap between the past and the present, allowing us to revisit cold cases with fresh eyes. While it's too late to save Gacy's victims, it's not too late to uncover their stories. As we move forward, these advancements remind us of the power of innovation, not just to solve crimes, but to bring justice, closure, and even accountability to those who need it most. What if John Wayne Gacy wasn't just a lone predator, but part of something much larger and more sinister? In our final act, the Delta Project conspiracy will unravel a shadowy network of human trafficking and explore how Gacy might have been both a pawn and a key player. How deep could the connections go? And what secrets might still be buried alongside his victims? Let's connect the dots. Welcome to Act 7, the Delta Project conspiracy. Finally, let's tackle the Delta Project, a shadowy sex trafficking ring that Gacy was rumored to be connected to. In our reimagined version, Gacy isn't just a lone predator. He's a cog in a much larger machine. Imagine undercover agents infiltrating this ring only to find evidence linking Gacy to its operations. What if Gacy wasn't just killing for his own gratification, but also disposing of victims who threatened the Delta Project's secrets? This conspiracy adds a layer of suspense and global intrigue, turning Gacy's already horrifying story into a sprawling, true crime epic. But here's the thing: sex and human trafficking isn't just a storyline, it's a horrifying reality. Even today, the modern-day landscape of trafficking is vast, complex, and shockingly close to home. Let's take a moment to shift gears and explore the dark truth about trafficking in our world today, connecting the chilling echoes of Gacy's crimes to a much larger epidemic. Let me hit you with some hard facts. According to recent data from the International Labor Organization, there are an estimated 27.6 million people trapped in forced labor and human trafficking worldwide. And yes, that includes right here in the United States. It's a $150 billion industry that preys on the vulnerable, profiting from the exploitation of human beings. Trafficking isn't just confined to shadowy back alleys or far-off countries. In fact, the National Human Trafficking Hotline reported over 10,000 cases in the U.S. in 2022 alone. Victims are often lured by promises of a better life, only to find themselves trapped in a cycle of coercion, violence, and fear. Now, think about Gacy's time, the 1970s. Trafficking operations then relied on physical connections, street-level recruitment, word-of-mouth networks, and underground rings like the fictional Delta Project. Fast forward to today, and technology has taken trafficking into the digital age. The dark web, an encrypted part of the internet, has become a breeding ground for trafficking operations. Traffickers advertise victims in hidden marketplaces using cryptocurrencies to conceal their transactions. Social media platforms have also been weaponized, with traffickers targeting vulnerable individuals through fake profiles and promises of work, modeling gigs, or relationships. And here's the scariest part. Trafficking doesn't just thrive in the shadows. It intersects with everyday industries, like hospitality, agricultural construction, and is often hiding right in plain sight. So, how do we fight something this pervasive? Awareness is key. Let's run through some of the red flags that might indicate someone is a trafficking victim. One red flag is lack of control. Victims often aren't allowed to speak for themselves or carry identification. A second red flag could be signs of abuse, unexplained injuries, malnourishment, or signs of physical restraint. A third red flag is constant monitoring. Someone is always watching or escorting the individual, even in seemingly harmless settings. A fourth red flag could be frequent relocations, where victims are moved around to avoid detection. If you suspect trafficking, the National Human Trafficking Hotline is a lifeline. Their number is 1-888-373-7899. This hotline can connect you with experts who can guide you in reporting concerns. So, why connect this to Gacy? because his story, whether tied to a trafficking ring or not, reflects the insidious nature of how predators operate. Gacy's victims were often vulnerable, seeking work or companionship, just like many trafficking victims today. His ability to blend into society mirrors how trafficking networks operate in plain sight, relying on secrecy and manipulation to thrive. Gacy's crimes shocked the nation, but they also serve as a reminder of the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface of our communities. The fight against trafficking continues today, and while the methods may have evolved, the mission remains the same: to protect the vulnerable and bring predators to justice. Let this segment serve as a call to action, because while Gacy's story is firmly in the past, the shadow of exploitation remains, and it's up to all of us to shine a light. So there you have it. John Wayne Gacy. Rewritten and reimagined. From hidden victims and courtroom dramas to shadowy conspiracies, this episode reminds us that even the most infamous cases still have layers waiting to be uncovered. If Gacy's story teaches us anything, it's the importance of vigilance, empathy, and accountability. Whether he acted alone or not, his reign of terror serves as a stark reminder of how easily evil can hide in plain sight. Thank you for joining me on this twisted journey into the mind of one of history's most infamous killers. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, because here at The Guilty Files, the truth is never the whole story. And that's another chapter closed on The Guilty Files True Crime Rewritten. I hope tonight's fictionalized take on this week's case kept you intrigued, entertained, and maybe even made you see things from a new perspective. After all, true crime is never just black and white. It's full of shades, possibilities, and what-ifs. If you're new here or missed it, be sure to listen to Brian's episode, The Guilty Files, Tales of a Crime, where he broke down the cold, hard facts of this week's case with his signature sharp analysis. It's the perfect complement to tonight's dramatization. Together, these episodes show that at The Guilty Files, we offer true crime twice told, giving you the facts and the fiction in a way that no other podcast does. I want to take a moment to thank you, yes you, for being the reason this podcast exists. Your love as a listener of true crime fuels us to dig deeper, explore further, and bring you stories that spark your imagination. So if you're enjoying the show, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend, leave a review, or tag us on social media. Your engagement means the world to us. We love hearing from you. Reach out to me anytime via email at Dani, it's D-A-N-I, at paranormalworldproductions.com. And of course, none of this would happen without the Paranormal World Productions studio. They're the masterminds behind our polished sound and seamless production, bringing the stories we tell to life. To learn more about their work and what's coming next, visit them online at www.paranormalworldproductions.com. We'll be back next week with another case, another chapter, and more true crime, revisited and reimagined. Thanks for listening to The Guilty Files True Crime Rewritten. Until next time, stay suspicious, keep it guilty, just be sure to keep your alibis airtight, and maybe delete your browser history. The story's done, but the intrigue never ends. See you next week for more guilt and glory. I'm Dani, signing off.